welcome to this segment of Leaders. We're talking with an SBC Hall of Famer, Joe Brennan. And welcome.
Thank you, Sue.
I wanted to start back when you and I first met.
2005, 2006, Earls Court.
Earls Court, and you had a vision.
I did.
And so I wanted to talk with you about that. I wanted to ask you to give a little bit of history about what you had done prior to that, because it was a little off the beaten path.
Nothing, which is why you were laughing at the time. So prior to that, I had spent the last 8 years or so just in consumer web and media. At the time, it was just after I left AOL, back when that was actually a big online company.
We remember that.
Yeah. And one of the first opportunities that came to me after AOL was consulting for an online gaming company. You remember our friend Giancarlo Bettini, who had an online casino global player. And this was when, the first wave, everything was hot. You had the companies going public for online gaming. You had party gaming having such a big presence here in the United States. But you had already started to see a bit of a crackdown coming from government, particularly at the federal level, on targeting the industry. And while I was at AOL, there was a lot of like-minded people that were kind of gathering into an early virtual kitchen cabinet. So folks from AOL, Google, MSN, Yahoo. Boy, those are a bunch of dinosaur names now, aren't they? And looking at some of the activities that people were targeting, and they were targeting it seemingly only because they were occurring online. And this group, which eventually came to be known as IMEGA, the Interactive Media, Entertainment, and Gaming Association, just had the point of view that, listen, anything that you can do legally in the offline world, you should be able to do legally in the online world. And one of the first issues that popped up, because there was so much activity about it in Washington, D.C. at the time, Senator John Kyle in particular, was online gaming and banning online gaming. And so, this being the one person who was from this virtual kitchen cabinet who actually lived in Washington, D.C., I got kind of pushed into being the person going to the committee meetings, going to the conferences, things like that. And that's how I kind of, through that long and twisty road, found myself talking to you in the, it's funny to think about it now, the back corner of Earls Court, the B room or whatever it was. And you were, that, candidly, and this is why you're in the Hall of Fame, you were the catalyst for marrying up somebody like me who was representing people who wanted to take both a legislative and litigation path towards legalization for online gaming, and then folks in the industry who had a similar point of view.
And did you have a clue at that point how difficult it was going to be and long it was going to take?
No. I mean, a great example was, it was November 2008 that I first started having meetings in New Jersey with legislators like Senator Ray Lesniak about legalizing sports betting. And I remember my wife, Jennifer, at the time asked me, how long do you think that would take? And I said 3 years. And so it only took 7 more years than that. So I was surprised at how long it took to get there. And that in the interim, legalizing online casino, which now is such a tough ask here, that was the first thing that actually got legalized in New Jersey in 2013 and then went live in 2014. And if you remember, there's the brick and mortar industry, there was a lot of opposition to that because of the notions, a lot of the same notions that are facing the expansion of online casino in the U.S. right now, worries about cannibalization. They still exist today. And we were able to overcome that in New Jersey. And New Jersey is actually, I constantly talk about it like it's a favorite child, but we had 10 years to do it right there. And I think they did it very right. And you had a lot of it was just a lucky break that a lot of the right people were in the right place at the right time in New Jersey for both online gaming and then sports betting. And things that now we look at in the industry, and not just ourselves, Wall Street, the media, everybody look at as taken as just givens, mobile betting, things like that, at the time were considered so controversial and probable non-starters, and now they're just cornerstones of truth that, of course, you have to have betting on mobile phones. And that was heresy at the time.
Right. Well, talk a little bit about the relationship with New Jersey and with the governor, with the legislators, because I don't think New Jersey gets enough credit for being as dogged as they were with, they lost time after time after time until they got to the big dance, and then they had a good outcome.
New Jersey was like
talk
an
about
old
that.
heavyweight champion. And, Jake Paul and Mike Tyson, maybe you should be listening to this right now. But they're like an old heavyweight champion who was getting touched up by a younger, more nimble, more powerful, faster, better resourced opponent, and just hung in there long enough and had, real punching power. And that was getting this whole thing in front of the Supreme Court of the United States. They only had to win once, and they won when it mattered. And there's a lot of people that you never hear anybody talk about now that were so key to getting that done. A lot of people talk about Governor Chris Christie, and of course he gets a lot of credit for supporting it, and then especially for bringing in Ted Olsen, who was like the Tom Brady of constitutional lawyers. I think you were there the first hearing in the federal courthouse there in Trenton, and seeing like grown men, like lawyers, walking up to this guy during recesses to get pictures with him or ask for his autograph just to talk to him. It's like being around the Babe Ruth of constitutional law. Was really amazing. So Governor Christie gets a lot of credit for that, but there's a lot of people that haven't gotten a lot of credit. The state legislator that most often gets mentioned is Senator Ray Lesniak, and if it wasn't for Ray, who is crazy like a fox, and for all of Ray's, colorfulness, he really is a smart legislator. Even Governor Christie said he was probably the finest legislator that New Jersey had at the time. And that was tough because they were not political friends. But I think of, for instance, Senator Jim Whalen, who passed away, who was the state senator from Atlantic City. And he was more of like the quiet driving force because he was trying to do something for his hometown. He'd been mayor of Atlantic City, now he's a state senator. He could see the Atlantic Club from the conference room window. He could see his home right there. And I remember him saying, he's very emotional, saying, I'm just trying to save my town. I'm just trying to save my town. And I think this is a way that we can get an advantage and we turn things around, because Atlantic City was in huge decline. But there's other folks like Assemblyman Berzicelli, Senator Carrillos, others. They're people that time has kind of forgotten. I haven't. Every opportunity I get, I speak about those people because it was not one person. I know a couple of books have been written, say like, oh, it was me. I was the one who did it. Like, not me, but the person writing the book said that they were the one who did it. And I get, people are really nice with things that they say to me about legalization, but that was such an amazing team effort, and everything came together all at once. And it's a team effort that you were part of. It's really fortunate to have the right people at the right place at the right time.
Well, you bring up Ted Olsen, who was the one who really brought it over the line. Talk about what the legal premise was behind it. What was successful about it? Because I know there were kind of various tacks that were taken along the route.
What it really boiled down to is Olsen said that what Congress had done, rather than making sports betting illegal, it took the power away from the state legislatures to make it legal. And then and they did it in a weird way by giving the professional sports leagues and the NCAA a right to more or less police it by objecting to that. Like, they could go to the court, and they had a right in the civil courts to go and get the courts to block any effort to legalize sports betting. And so that's a power that's not enumerated in the Constitution. And I think, I think Ted Olson took that case. When you look at the cases that Ted Olson has taken, they're all, like, most of them are ones for the history books. So you'd wonder, why does a guy of Ted Olson's stature take this one? And I don't think that Ted Olson, I've only had a few brief conversations with the guy, but I don't think Ted Olson had a strong opinion about sports betting one way or the other. But it was that Congress essentially delegating a power that it did not have and taking a power away from the states that it clearly did have, that it was invested with, and doing so in favor of private entities, that being the sports leagues and the NCAA. I think that for him was really what drew him to that, because there's so many other things that had that law stood, PASPA had already been cited in a number of different cases that had come before the Supreme Court, even the Voting Rights Act, as, you know, some states being seen to be treated differently or being granted different rights or different powers, but in a somewhat arbitrary way. Just because Congress passes a law, that doesn't mean that it's a good law. I think that's something that, you know, we recognized early on, that PASPA, when you read it, it was kind of, you know, a granite statue built on feet of clay. And almost certainly that's what Ted Olson saw when Chris Christie contacted him about taking this on the behalf of New Jersey. And here, this is something to be clear about. Governor Christie, he panned out very well after, at first, not being a particularly strong ally. So, I mean, at one point early on, we had to come back to this legislatively a couple of times. And the first time, Governor Christie held us off whether he's going to support it or not. And I remember the day that we were going for the vote in the state Senate there in New Jersey, and Governor Christie's chief of staff called us in and said, look, we'd really like you to hold off the vote on this one. And the reason is the governor is trying to get the Super Bowl to be held at the brand new stadium, like across the street here. And at the time, everybody thought, like, well, yeah, of course, that would be a great thing to do. Had the Super Bowl come to New Jersey. And so, yeah, everybody agreed to hold off on that vote. And then once New Jersey was awarded the Super Bowl, then the governor will release his Republicans in the legislature to go and vote in favor of the bill. Well, they got the Super Bowl, and then the governor had them kill it. Maybe that was part of the lease deal for the Super Bowl. So I understood, you know, the governor, he's trying to do the best, what he thought at the time, for New Jersey. But that was where crazy like a fox Senator Ray Lesniak said, well, we're going to have a statewide vote. That's how we're going to do it. And whatever the result is, the governor can't step in front of it and block it. At the state of New Jersey, the citizens vote in favor of this. So in some ways at the time, Governor Christie was a somewhat reluctant ally because he got dragged along by the voters of New Jersey. And there was concerns that once that vote passed on a 2-1 margin, that if the governor, you know, there's suspicion that the governor might be, you know, not exactly in team sports betting. He might be in team leagues, pro leagues. So there's a worry that he was going to assign somebody like the junior most guy who just graduated from law school in the state attorney general's office to go ahead and take on this case. So when Dale Florio, who was one of our state lobbyists and was very close to Governor Christie, and he was really the quiet man, inside man on the lobbying effort, he called me up and he said, Governor Christie's about to announce that he's hiring Ted Olson to pursue this in the Supreme Court.
And you knew he was serious.
I was like, so you got to, when Governor Christie was in, he was in, you know, in for a penny, in for a pound. And that's when that happened, there's maybe like 2 or 3 points along the way where you're able to kind of lift your head up above like the daily grind of this thing and say, we're going to win. And that was one of them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and I think for people watching who may not know the backstory, you referenced PASPA, which was key to the Supreme Court case, which was like a, 1992 law by a New Jersey senator and it was Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act. And the internet was not even a gleam
Not
in
even a
anyone's
consideration.
eye
It was the
in '92.
it was DARPANet
And
at the time.
It was really, I think, to affect the telephone betting, essentially. So, I mean, if you look at that as the base of what one of the restrictions are, there have also been restrictions related to the Wire Act and things like that. But this particular case was based on that.
Also, remember when PASPA was enacted, it essentially had a clause in it that came to be known euphemistically as the New Jersey Clause. And that was, from the date of the signing of the law, any state that had legal casino gambling for a fixed period of time, I can't remember what it was.
Which was only like two
would be
at
able
that
to
point.
would be able to vote within 1 year, whether or not that they were going to. And it only fit one state. It fit New Jersey. And unfortunately, that vote became a political football for in-state politics. At the time, you remember, Christy Todd Whitman, who eventually became governor of New Jersey, was running against the incumbent governor, Governor Florio, who was a very unpopular governor. And early polls showed that he had started to gain on former Governor Whitman. And at the same time, this was entered into the state legislature. The state Senate was controlled by the Democrats, and they voted in the state Senate to approve a statewide vote for sports betting. But the state assembly was controlled by the Republicans. And there was a concern by Speaker Chuck Itayan, who's passed away, that if they allowed for a statewide vote on sports betting to be on the ballot at the same time that the governor's race, that would attract too many potentially Democratic-leaning voters. So it was Chuck Itayan voted along with the Assembly Republicans to kill the statewide vote bill, and that's why New Jersey never got an opportunity to take advantage of it. You'd have to think, like, if it wasn't for New Jersey's governor's race that year and the political calculations of their Republican Speaker of the Assembly, what if New Jersey had had a statewide vote, voted in favor of sports betting, became the only other state in the country that had legal sports betting? Where would we be today?
And that would have been when, roughly?
That would have been 1993.
Okay.
So would things have come together anyplace else sooner, anytime soon, in order to start the kind of legalization efforts that happened there? I would guess probably not nearly as soon, but
it would have changed the equation for sure.
I mean, it's a nice thing to chat about over a beer across the street from the State House, but it definitely would have changed the dynamic.
Before we move into more recent times, let me ask you, what was your motivation to fight this battle? Why?
When I was at AOL, one of the last things I was involved in before I was invited to leave, and a wave of layoffs, we were looking at what are things that AOL had that we were maybe underutilizing that we could get into new lines of business. Okay, so this is like 2003-ish or so. And our team was looking at it. And one of the things that I looked at was that, well, we had an AOL UK division and it had an AOL European division. And that was when online sports betting and early online casino was really starting to take off and flourish in those markets in the UK and Europe and elsewhere. And so I had proposed, well, why don't we use AOL UK to get into the online sports betting business? And I've been around sports betting my whole life, growing up in around the Philadelphia area. I did my first parlay ticket when I was in Catholic grade school. So it was much more, it was much more commonplace and socially acceptable there, and seeing an opportunity for doing it legally, even if it was overseas. And it's funny when I think about it now. My team reported up to the person who was then the vice chairman of AOL, and that's Ted Leonsis, who is currently the owner of the Washington Capitals and the Washington Wizards, and he's one of the largest shareholders in both DraftKings and also in Sportradar. And so they floated my idea up the chain, and it came back from Ted's office like, I don't think that's a really good idea for us right now. I have trust issues, this, that, and the other thing. So unfortunately, while that one didn't prevail at the time, that's really how I kind of got my interest in the sector. As a side note to that, I saw Ted actually at a Wizards game a couple of years after PASPA was overturned. And I hadn't, it wasn't like I was in his office every day, but he did remember me and everything like that. And I reminded him of this. I said, seems like a really good idea now. And he was really genial. He said, like, yeah, I guess we should have listened to you. He was a real nice guy about it. But yeah, just imagine if he had just let me off the leash all the way back there in 2003. Who knows what we might have accomplished.
That would have been amazing.
Yeah.
So 2024, we're at 38, I think, plus states at this point. I know me personally, now granted, I'm older and I never thought that it would be legal in my lifetime. Yeah. And I have been absolutely shocked to see the adoption. How do you view what's transpired in the last almost 6 years now?
Well, it's funny. There was a lot of people who had your point of view. A number of guys, including my classmate in the Hall of Fame, Jimmy Vaccaro. I remember when I first talked to him about this back in 2008. He's like, kid, I'll be dead and gone long time before that ever happens. And as far as I know, Jimmy's still kicking.
He is.
And he still owes me dinner anywhere in Vegas. Yeah, there's a few guys in Vegas who said that wagered me that. I didn't think that we'd get to 30 plus states quite so quickly. It has gone a lot faster than I thought it would. Some of it I think is good. There's quite a few things though that make me think if I had a chance to go back, I wish I would have spent more time on this. Or so, for instance, the really aggressive marketing and advertising of it. That's something, and it wasn't like I was not warned about it. It's interesting. The gentleman who, two British gentlemen who ran Greenwood Racing, which is the company that runs Parks Casino just outside of Philadelphia. I remember meeting with them early on, and they warned me. And they said, Joe, look, you do this, you get it legalized. You really got to be on guard because the British companies, Ladbrokes, William Hill, that all those companies, they're going to come over here, and their aggressive style of marketing is going to come with them. And they're more concerned about like getting customers, wringing it out of them, burn the customer, get another customer. And at the time, I thought, well, look, casino advertising and lottery advertising is already so heavily regulated. What you can say, how you can portray it, when you can say it, where it can be aired or displayed. We assumed at the time that the same thing would apply if and when we were able to legalize this. And so I am very surprised at how it was essentially granted free reign. Now, it was done, I think, under the false premise that the operators had, which was, we have to build this market quickly. Well, this market already existed. That's why it got legalized. You had a huge illegal market, online, mobile, everywhere in America. And all we were seeking was to migrate it to a regulated market. And so this notion that they had to build this market from scratch, so they were given the license to advertise and market so heavily and so freely, it was a false notion. And I think that was a huge mistake, and one I'd really love to get back in the box somehow, short of federal legislation regulating that. But even, I would say, with some of the more recent ugly events with both college and pro athletes getting entangled, whether it's with either betting illegally or potentially fixing matches or fixing at least their own performance. I know it's tough for people to agree with it, and they might just think that I'm trying to put shine on an apple here, but that's the system working. Jonte Porter, other people, them getting caught with their betting improprieties, that's the system working. If that had happened 5, 6, 7 years earlier, he wouldn't have been caught. And what might it have turned into? So nobody promised perfection when we went to legalization, but they did promise there was going to be a better situation and a less dangerous situation than the one that we already had.
Do you think the industry has been successful at migrating players from offshore sites?
No. Unfortunately, that's why I started a sports book. So
I knew this would lead to that.
well, I'm trying not to. I'm not trying to take advantage into a plug.
I do want to end with that.
But-
So that's why this is my segue.
Okay, so I didn't want to be self-serving, but no. The sad thing is that when we were lobbying on behalf of legalization, the numbers, the data that we use to say to state lawmakers, this is worthwhile to do, were numbers that were derived from the street market and the offshore market. And there's a certain kind of American-style betting that was going on. And we wanted to see that market migrated into our regulated market. And unfortunately, what has happened instead is that more UK style of betting, which is very aggressive, going after small stake players, weeding out the ones that are either winners or could be dangerous winners, playing too high, things like that. And then, look, it's not against the law in all but 2 states in the United States for a player to place a wager, an unregulated wager. So most places, the player who's betting offshore or wherever, or even betting with the street bookie, he's not the one committing the crime. The person taking the bet, the offshore sports book or the corner bookie, taking that bet, they're definitely committing a crime, but the player isn't. So you have this kind of orphaned cohort of players. They want to be in this market. They want to participate in this market, but they're being thrown out or not even allowed in. So yeah, that's why myself, Adam Bjorn, and a few others, we started our sports book, Prime Sports. We're live in Ohio. We're live in New Jersey. Hopefully be live shortly in Kentucky. But it is not to target the customers who are going to FanDuel and DraftKings necessarily. A lot of those are largely incremental, new players to the marketplace. We're looking to convert the people who are still betting offshore or still betting on the street because they haven't found the product or the opportunity to bet into the regulated market. Once we got those guys, then we're going to go and we're going to pick FanDuel and DraftKings clean, right? But no, in the interim, I think that's where the opportunity is. And I think it's important. Something like this, operators like us and like Circa really need to find a toehold because it's unsustainable, I think, for the market to have such a large regulated market existing against an equally large unregulated market that might actually be more than just equally large. It may be larger.
Do you have any, as you look forward, I know we need to wrap up, but as you look forward, where do you see the industry going?
That's a really good question. I think the era of irrational exuberance is over. I think with all the new players that came into the industry, not only the sports books, but especially like the leagues, the sports media companies, a lot of people who were brand new and they kind of jumped into this because this was going to be the new area for technology. So a lot of technology plays, startup companies, things like that. And there's been a lot of overpromise about what we're going to be able to do in this industry. And you still hear it today, even from people who are the top voices in this industry. Things like, oh, you'll be able to bet on every shot, on every pitch, on every play. And that actually can't happen right now because of everything from the latency of the data feeds to the latency of the broadcast feed, things like that. So a lot of that initial exuberance that was driven by investors, by the media, by the leagues, and by entrepreneurs because they were trying to find a place in this new gold rush market, I think that's now largely started to recede. And we think we're part of Wave 2.0, where this is more about, there's enough new players and enough existing players where serving them better, treating them better, and then also at the same time being better shepherds for the ones that maybe have, showing signs of problem gambling, things like that. I think the industry has to become better shepherds and more credible and believable shepherds about the product that we're selling, what it is that we're selling, who we work with. And that's not going to be an easy one. This is going to be a tough one because a lot of people have created a lot of collateral damage with the way that they entered the market so fast, so furious. And it's going to take all sides. Operators don't have the solution by themselves. Regulators don't have it. The leagues, everybody else, all the stakeholders. If somebody is betting today on a sports betting site, they got there through a collection of seeing it in the media, having the payments, bank account, credit card, going through a marketing, maybe it's an ad market, maybe a promotion that they saw at the ball game, whatever it may be, and then winding up eventually in our sports book and where they go from there. So a lot of people had a hand in getting that player into the system. We all have a responsibility as shepherds now to make sure that that player is taken care of.
Great. Well, I really appreciate you sharing a history that really only you know.
Yeah, it's probably for the best.
Yeah, it's good stuff. And wish you luck with your new endeavor.
Thank you. And Sue, I never say it enough. None of this would have happened without you. And I cannot thank you enough from our first meeting back there in 2005 for taking the time. You must have been laughing to yourself. Who is this guy from AOL? And why does he think he can do anything in this industry? But I can't thank you enough. If it wasn't for you, this stuff wouldn't have happened, okay?
Well, I laugh a lot of times when somebody comes up and says, we're going to revolutionize the industry. But I did not laugh when you said that. So
did I actually say revolutionize? That's kind of cringy.
No, I don't believe you did. But that was the concept.
Yes,
so thank you very much. I appreciate it.